They called me the quiet one, the extra, the girl in the background of every family photo usually cut off at the shoulder. For 29 years, I learned how to shrink myself so others could shine. My name is Madison, but no one ever said it with pride. Not like they did when they said Colette. Colette, my older sister, the blonde beacon of charm and attention. At age 12, I remember standing in the middle of one of Mom's dinner parties, trying to hand her a drawing I had spent hours perfecting. She barely glanced at it before saying, "Not now, sweetheart." Colette's showing everyone her new dance. Colette tilted her head and smiled that rehearsed pageant grin, and every adult in the room followed like she was royalty. That night, I tore the drawing into pieces and flushed them down the toilet. It was the first time I realized that being talented did not matter in our family being loud and shiny did. From then on, I became the wallpaper. At birthdays, holidays, weddings, I was the extra chair. Madison, be a dear and take the photo, they would say, never inviting me into the frame. My mother, Vivian, always introduced me as our quieter daughter, in the same tone people use when apologizing for bringing a salad to a steakhouse. Even when I got into art school, she told friends I was figuring things out creatively, while throwing lavish praise at Colette for getting engaged to a tech heir. For years, I convinced myself that invisibility meant safety. But the truth is, they just did not care if I existed. What they did not know is that while they were busy erasing me, I was building something that would put me on the cover of the very magazines they worship. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted to be seen. But when the day came and they finally looked up, what they saw was not the girl they forgot. It was the woman they never saw coming. While my family saw me as invisible, I was building an empire they would never imagine. By day, I worked a quiet design job no one asked me about. By night, I became someone else entirely. Under the name Ivy Vale, I started freelancing in fashion. At first, it was just retouching photos and designing layouts. Then came the shoots. Then came the editorials. By 25, I was flying to Milan for art direction gigs. By 27, Vogue was calling. And by 29, I was offered the biggest opportunity of my life to become the face and creative lead of a campaign called Unconventional Beauty, celebrating powerful women who had been overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated. I did not tell anyone in my family, not because I was hiding, but because I knew they would never believe it unless they saw it in print. And fate, as if it were in on the plan, handed me the perfect moment. A few weeks before the campaign launch, I got an invitation in the mail, Colette's engagement dinner, held at the exclusive Rosewood Hotel rooftop. Gold leaf paper cursive lettering, and a little sticky note from my mother that read, "Try to dress nicely this time, Madison." I almost laughed. Try. Before we go on, if you have ever been dismissed or overlooked by your own family, comment yes below, and hit subscribe to follow this journey of quiet revenge, transformation, and justice. The night of the dinner, I stood in front of the mirror, wearing a piece from my own campaign, a sleek, deep sapphire gown designed for movement and power. It was not flashy, it was deliberate, understated elegance. I wore no name tag, no announcement, just presence. When I stepped into the rosewood, the air shifted. Heads turned unsure. Colette blinked. My mother smiled stiffly, unsure if I was a guest or someone's assistant. No one knew they were about to be seated beside a Vogue cover star. What they had once dismissed as forgettable was about to become unforgettable. Not through noise, but through arrival, the kind they could no longer ignore. The rosewood rooftop shimmered with soft jazz and expensive wine, just as I remembered from Colette's graduation party years ago, only this time, I was not hiding behind a potted plant holding someone else's purse. I arrived early enough to blend with the crowd, letting the tension build. Colette was glowing, of course, floating between guests in a sequined gown, soaking in every compliment like sunlight. My mother, Vivian, spotted me from across the room and gave that tight, artificial smile that said, "Try not to embarrass us." I nodded politely and kept walking, letting their discomfort bloom in my wake. I found my place at the family table. My name was on the card, Madison Hale. No Ivy. No title. Just the forgotten girl they always assumed would sit quietly, eat her chicken breast, and leave before the cake. But then Sebastian Colette's fiancé entered with a glass of whiskey and a proud grin. He walked straight over to me. "You're Ivy Vale, right?" he asked a little too loudly. "You're the one behind that Vogue campaign, Unconventional Beauty. I just invested in the brand this week. I had no idea you were Madison's sister." The table fell dead silent. Colette's head whipped around so fast, her earrings caught the candlelight. "What did you say?" she asked, voice already sharp. Sebastian glanced between us. "Wait, you are Ivy Vale, right? You were on the cover. That's your campaign. She looks just like you." Colette's wineglass clinked against the table. "You're joking. That is not possible. Madison's, she's not in fashion." Her voice cracked just enough to betray panic. I leaned back in my chair and gave her the smallest smile. "You never asked." Vivian's face drained of color. Guests started murmuring. A few even clapped, half in confusion, half in awe. Sebastian turned to me again, eyes wide. "You're brilliant. Seriously, I read your piece on creative resilience. You're changing the industry." Colette stood up, knocking over her chair. "This was supposed to be my night, it was." Until I arrived. The same girl they once ignored had become the woman who made them all feel unseen, and I had not even said a word until now. I thought the fallout would take days. It took hours. By the next morning, my face, Madison Hale, also known as Ivy Vale, was everywhere. Screenshots from the dinner flooded social media. The Vogue cover resurfaced. A video clip of Sebastian calling me brilliant went viral on TikTok, stitched with reactions from women saying, "This is what revenge looks like." For the first time, my name was in headlines, and not as someone's sister, not as an afterthought, but as the main character. Yet the attention came with a cost. Colette lashed out first. She posted a photo of us as children, with a caption laced in venom. "Family means forgiveness, even when someone tries to steal your moment." The comments section exploded. Some defended her, others saw through it. Then came the troll strangers dissecting my body, my past, my success, as if I had to justify every step I took. People who never knew me suddenly had opinions about whether I deserved to be where I was. But the real gut punch came in private. My cousin Harper, once Colette's shadow, sent me a voice message that started with a whisper. "I have to tell you something." She confessed that Colette had sabotaged my high school dating life, spreading rumors to keep boys away, telling people I was damaged and obsessed whenever anyone looked my way. One of those boys had been Julian Crawford, my childhood crush, who stopped talking to me without explanation. Harper's voice broke as she said, "She wanted to make sure you stayed invisible." I felt the room tilt as her words sank in. This was not just neglect. It was cruelty masked as sisterhood. That same afternoon, I received an email from Julian. Subject line, "I'm sorry." He had seen the campaign. He remembered what Colette told him back then. "I believed her, and I regret it every day," he wrote. I stared at the screen, unsure whether to cry or scream. The betrayal was not just in their silence, it was in the way they weaponized my quiet. But the world was listening now. And for the first time, I was not backing down. They taught me how to disappear, but I had taught myself how to rise. The rage came in waves, cold, then hot, then strangely calm. But beneath it all was a sense of purpose I had never felt so sharply before. I was done playing their ghost. The next morning, I woke up to over 200 emails, half from fashion brands begging for collaborations, half from women telling me their own stories of being silenced, overlooked, erased by families that praised the loudest and punished the quiet. It was not just about me anymore. It was about every girl who had been told to step aside so someone shinier could take her place. So I wrote. I wrote like my life depended on it. My first blog post was titled "The Invisible Sister." In it, I told the truth. About the dinner, about my family's dismissal, about the power in not needing their validation anymore. It spread fast. The comments poured in. Teachers, nurses, mothers, artists, they all shared their own versions of being forgotten. And somewhere between the pain and the power, I found peace. Not the kind that comes from forgiveness, the kind that comes from finally being heard. A week later, I was asked to speak on a panel about women in leadership. I hesitated at first, afraid my voice would still shake. But when I walked on stage, the applause washed over me like armor. I talked about what it means to lead when no one ever saw you coming. I spoke not as Ivy Vale, but as Madison Hale, the girl they tried to erase, and the woman they could not ignore. Meanwhile, my mother tried calling. Voicemails that started formal and ended bitter. Colette went silent, retreating into what the tabloids called emotional exhaustion. Sebastian reached out too, not for gossip, but to thank me. "You saved me," he said, "from a lifetime with someone who never told the truth." Then I went back home. Not to visit, to reclaim. The Hale estate was being sold downsized according to the whispers. I walked through my childhood bedroom one last time, fingers grazing the dusty shelf where I once kept sketchbooks they laughed at. I found an old photo me at 6 eyes bright, holding a crayon drawing no one remembered. I tucked it into my bag, not as a souvenir, as proof. That girl was always enough. She just needed someone to tell her. And finally, she had herself. I did not announce anything. I simply moved forward. While Colette spiraled in silence and my mother scrambled to save face at charity luncheons, I launched the campaign that changed everything. Quiet confidence was not loud. It did not scream with glitter or shock value. It whispered the truth. It celebrated the ones who had been forgotten, overlooked, underestimated, and still rose. It was not just a brand campaign. It was a declaration. Within 2 weeks, we had features in L. Harper's Bazaar and a front-page spread in The Cut, titled "The Sister They Ignored." Models of all sizes, ages, and skin tones wore looks I designed with the sole purpose of making them feel seen. One of them was a shy single mother named Lainey, who said through tears, "No one's ever asked me what makes me feel beautiful before." That moment stayed with me more than any cover. I turned down interview requests that wanted drama. I refused talk show appearances that wanted me to spill family secrets. Because this was no longer about revenge. It was about rewriting the legacy they tried to trap me in. I was no longer Ivy Vale, hiding behind pseudonyms. I was Madison Hale, undeniable, unshakable, and finally, whole. Sebastian emailed once more this time with a proposal to co-invest in a scholarship fund for girls in underserved communities. I said yes. Not because of him, but because someone somewhere needed the chance I had to fight so hard for. The fund was named the Scene Project. And then came the letter. Handwritten. From Colette. "I do not know how to compete with you anymore," it read. Maybe I never had to. Maybe I was just afraid. I folded it gently and placed it in a drawer. I had nothing to say back. Some stories needed to end with silence, but my story was not ending. It was still unfolding. In every girl who stopped apologizing for her voice. In every woman who finally looked in the mirror and saw enough. I had become the person I needed when I was little. And now I was passing that torch with quiet, unwavering confidence. I used to think being seen meant being loud, grabbing attention, proving yourself over and over. But now I know it is something quieter, deeper. Being seen means standing in your truth, even when no one claps. Especially then. Months after the campaign's success, I walked through Bryant Park just before dusk. The city buzzed around me, but for the first time, I was not trying to disappear. On a billboard near Fifth Avenue, my image lingered, a portrait of calm strength, wrapped in muted tones, eyes forward. The caption read, "Redefining Worth." Madison Hale. I stood there for a long moment, not out of vanity, but in awe of how far that invisible little girl had come. One night, I found a small envelope tucked under my apartment door. No return name. Inside was a photo, me and Colette at ages 8 and 10, side by side in matching dresses, hers pristine, mine wrinkled. A note was scribbled on the back. We were never enemies. Just afraid there wasn't enough space for both of us. I stared at it, unsure whether it was an apology or another manipulation. But I did not need an answer, because healing no longer depended on someone else's regret. It lived in the choices I made now, who I invited, and what I left behind. I continued mentoring young designers, partnering with shelters and schools, helping others step into their light. I was not chasing acceptance anymore. I was creating belonging. One morning, a girl named Kaya, only 17, stood on stage at one of our workshops and said, "I used to think I was invisible too. But if Madison Hale can change her story, maybe I can too." That is what this was always about. Not revenge, not recognition, but revolution, soft, steady, and soul deep. So, if you have ever been the forgotten daughter, the quiet sibling, the one who never got the applause, this story is for you. And if it spoke to something inside you, something that has waited too long to be heard, comment. I'm here now, and subscribe for more stories that prove silence is not weakness. It is where the strongest voices are born.